What's going on, everybody? My name is Ben and welcome back to the Apollo group build and the USS Kelvin here on Sci-Fi Wednesdays. Today, guys, we are going to be moving forward here on the Kelvin and trying to plan out a little bit here on our lighting system. Here's the deal. Now, I don't really know much about lighting, and I want to go ahead and see if I can't figure out how exactly the system is going to go together. So I thought what I would do is I would follow the instructions and I would go ahead and map out how these lighting kits are going to go together, because there's a couple different areas that we can light here on the kit. So I thought it would just be a good idea to draw it out. Then I can make my alterations. I can figure out what needs to go where, and we can go from there. So that's my main goal for today, is to figure out how this thing goes together. Now, the kit itself is pretty cool, at least from the instructions. It's easy to read, and I'm really excited to go ahead and give it a try, but I don't want to jump in too quickly. So I'm going to go ahead and map everything out. There's about 6 different areas you can light with the LEDs that are given to you in the kit. And of course, we need to go ahead and unpack that and check out all the parts, make sure we have everything. So let's go ahead and just give it a shot. Now, the lighting kit itself comes with this, first off, this straw. This is a lighting diffusing straw here that's going to be in the back of the nacelle. It also comes with all of these parts here, such as this ribbon cable, which we're going to be able to separate and use to go ahead and color code some of our LEDs. Of course, we have our LEDs as well, and this should actually come with a couple different colors. It should have white, which is kind of a warm white. It should have yellow, should have red, and 2 blue as well. So that's really nice. And he has a little diagram here drawn on each package, which is nice to have. I don't really know how to read it, but it's nice to have. Also, we have this 9-volt battery lead here that's going to be our power source. And of course, we have shrink tubing, which we'll use a little bit later once we get the system kind of set up. We have this really nice, very positive feeling switch. Also, it has one longer lead. Now, if you notice on LEDs, they'll have a longer leg and a shorter leg. The longer leg is actually positive. So anytime we have a positive LED lead, that's usually the longer leg, and this here is the same way. So I'm assuming one of them is positive in and one is positive out, because if I'm not mistaken, the switch goes only on the positive side. More shrink tubing here. These are all of our resistors. Resistors are going to be important because we need to go ahead and put one resistor on the positive leg for each of the LEDs. So something to think about for sure. And of course, more LEDs here. I got to tell you that this lighting kit doesn't seem too complicated, but again, I've never done this before, so let's go ahead and just draw it out and see what we have in store for us. First thing we're going to have to go ahead and deal with here is the battery. Now, the battery I'm probably going to have in the base somewhere, but we have a positive and a negative terminal on the battery. And on top of that, we have different areas here on the kit, like I mentioned, that are going to be lit up by our LEDs. So let's go ahead and just draw them out. It's going to be a really rough drawing, guys. I'm not necessarily an artist like this, so bear with me here. So the first section is going to be the deflector dish, and this is just going to be a real quick artist representation of a deflector dish. Next area that we're going to go ahead and have to install a light here is in the bridge. Now, the bridge is that domed area right on top of the saucer. So the bridge is going to be right here, and it's kind of stepped a little bit, and it's got a little dome on top, and then this is the top here of the saucer itself. It's going to come back, and there will be another light in the very back of this, which will be the impulse engine. Now, there's nothing here on the bottom that's lit up, so we don't have to worry about that. But that's going to be the impulse engine. And then below that is going to be the nacelle. And the nacelle is going to have a front Bussard collector right about here, which is going to be yellow. And there we go. And then at the very back of this, we're going to have actually 2 different zones. One's going to be those blue flashes that sit at the back of the nacelle. And then the very, very end that's going to glow. And all of that, of course, is run off of one 9-volt battery. And there's switch thrown in there in the positive side of one of the leads. So there's a lot we have to go ahead and kind of contend with. So let me go ahead and just kind of draw this out one more time here, and let's look at the LEDs and kind of figure out where they're all going to go. So here is a really quick map that I drew out here. This is real rough, guys, but this is kind of the general idea. I've got the red color pencil for positive and the black color pencil for negative, and this is my representation of how this is kind of going to come together. So starting at the top here, we have the deflector dish, which is a blue LED, positive and negative lead. The positive has a resistor and the negative just has a regular old wire. Moving on down to the saucer, we have the dome here, which is the bridge. Then we have the impulse engine. We also have the rear of the nacelle, 2 sections, and then we have the front of the nacelle that has the Bussard collector. So that's kind of the general zones. Now, if I were to draw a really rough sketch of the side profile for the Kelvin, and again, I am emphasizing really rough sketch, it's going to look something approximately like this. Let's go ahead and this is, again, really rough, guys, so bear with me. Here is the hanger, and there's a little connection point there. And then it's going to go down to the nacelle, and that's going to be the end. So something kind of like this, as you can see. So again, it's a really rough shape, but this is kind of how it's going to go. Now, of course, all the wires will be grouped to one bundle itself, but this is spread out for just ease of kind of understanding what I'm supposed to be doing. Then, of course, we have our switch here on the positive, and the switch, I guess, has a positive in and a positive out. So that will control the on-off feature for the LEDs. And then, of course, we have to go ahead and solder everything together, so that will actually work. Shouldn't be too difficult to do, but again, a little bit of a challenge. Then, of course, we have our battery here with positive, negative. That's going to be plugged into the battery lead, and that should then control all of my LEDs. So like I said, the bridge here is going to have one resistor hooked onto the positive side of that LED. It's going to be the warm white LED. We also have two blues. The larger blue is, I believe, going to go in the bottom of the nacelle, and the smaller blue is going to go here at the top here for the deflector dish. Again, a resistor on each of those positive leads. And then we have the yellow here on the front of the nacelle, again with the resistor on the positive lead. And finally, we have the red for the impulse engine with a resistor on the positive, everything linked together. So that's kind of the idea of how this is going to look. Here's the battery lead, of course, as you can see, got a red for positive, black for negative. And I think that's about the only parts and pieces to this whole setup. So it's not too difficult. It looks pretty straightforward. The soldering is going to be the real tricky part for me, but I think otherwise, I think we actually have a decent look of how this is actually supposed to go together. So now what I want to do is I want to go ahead and take a little bit of time here, and I'm going to go ahead and start soldering a few little things here and there. I'm not going to be able to solder any of the wires, but I can solder the resistors onto the end of each of the LED leads on the positive side of things. Then I can come back and just tack some wires on, test it up, and to go ahead and switch it on to make sure that all the LEDs work. So I have kind of a helping hand little tool here, and we're going to be using this for kind of holding these small delicate parts because, well, I can't hold them myself. And even if I could, they might heat up with the soldering iron, and I don't want to burn myself. So we're going to use a resistor, and we're going to be taking one of our LEDs. Let's go ahead and start with the bridge LED. So the warm white. That should be decent. So there's a warm white right there. And we're going to go ahead and try doing something called tinning. Now, again, I'm not an expert in soldering, not really big on that. But as far as I understand, we're going to just go ahead and take a little bit of solder, and we're just going to run it along the end here where we're going to be attaching it. So that, I guess, is called tinning as far as I've been told. So we're going to take our soldering iron, which has been heating up. We are ready to go. As far as I know, you have to go ahead and touch the soldering iron to the lead, and then we can just melt that solder directly on it. As far as I know, that's all you do. Let's go ahead and do the same thing with the LED. Touch that soldering tip right there to that LED lead. And there you go. So it melts pretty quick, but, oh, got stuck there. A little bit less. There we go. All right. And I think that's enough there. Whoops. This is going to be challenging for sure. So both of those are tinned. Let's go ahead and hook on the resistor. As far as I know, we can just barely heat that up, and then the resistor should just stick right on it. It looks pretty decent. I was told that the brighter the connection, the better your solder is. Also, that if it's dull, it's probably a cold solder, and you might want to redo it. So let's go ahead and just take a look at that under the magnifying glass. That looks pretty decent to me. I'm no expert on soldering, but I mean, it's all right. So now I'm going to go ahead and repeat that same process for all the LEDs and tack on each of the resistors on the positive legs of our LEDs. Then I'm also going to come back and I'm going to tack in a couple of quick wires so that I can kind of get this thing twisted together and make sure it actually works. All right, everybody. So this is kind of what we've come up with. This is a real quick, really dirty job here. I've got my battery hooked in. I've got all the LEDs temporarily wired up. I've got my switch wired up here as well. Let's go ahead and flip it on and see if it works. And there we go. All right, cool. So you can see the LEDs are working. The red, the white, the yellow, and the two blue. Everything seems to be lit up and seems to be working just fine. So we know that my soldering jobs worked enough for the resistors not to explode, and none of the LEDs are burning out, so I think we're okay. So you can see I really quickly just kind of twisted the wires together so that we would have some sort of a connection so that I could test out and make sure everything works. And in a low light environment, you can see they're actually very bright. I'm digging it. I think these look awesome. Of course, this isn't the finished product, guys, because we're going to have to go ahead and throw some heat shrink tubing on all of these to make sure we don't short anything out. We're going to have to go ahead and resolder a couple of leads. I want to color code the wires to the LEDs, make sure I know what's going to where. But I think otherwise we're pretty decent here. So let's go ahead and just take this all apart here. I'm going to re-put all of the LEDs back into their bags. for the accompanying colors so that I know what colors these are. And then we're going to actually shift over to the model itself, because I want to see if I can't maybe figure out a couple of these areas and maybe try to get a good idea about how these lights are going to fit in to the model itself. I think space management is very important in all this too. I want to be able to phase it correctly so that I don't run out of wire, but I also have everything neat and tidy and light blocked. There's a lot of steps in this whole process. I also have to start thinking ahead now about fiber optics, because I do want to drill out a couple of holes here and there on the saucer, on the spine, and on the hangar bay as well. So lots to do here, guys, for sure. So this is the saucer. We have a top and a bottom section of the saucer. The saucer is put together by just 4 little locating pins. We also have the saucer edges that are going to go on there and glue down. So honestly, there's not a lot of room in between those two saucers. Very, very tiny amount of room. So in order to fit everything together, we're going to have to be very careful on how exactly we hook these things in. Now, the instructions say I should mount it to the top side of the actual saucer, which would, I guess, be fine, but I'm kind of thinking I might want to try to mount it to the bottom part of the saucer and have the light pointing straight up. For example, here is the bottom saucer, and we have our warm white LED, and if I were to take my pliers and just bend these leads at about a 45-degree angle, maybe a little bit shallower than a 45, but if I just go ahead and bend these leads up just a little bit, do the other one here on the positive side, we should be able to place this right down directly in the center of the bottom part of the saucer. Now, I don't want to actually secure this with like super glue or anything like that, because super glue might actually damage the plastic here on the wire coatings. So instead, I'll probably use something like a glue gun, something like that would give a nice bit of hold without being caustic or destroying any of my parts. But something like this, if it was hooked into the center of this, it would shine directly up. And if I needed to, I could put a little bit of a shroud around that, directing it upwards towards the bridge and all those little domes and portholes and all of that. So that actually might work pretty well. Then I could just take the excess wire and just pull them down through this attachment point and then feed it down through the nacelle and then through my stand and into the base. At least that's kind of my idea here. Now I'm going to have to go ahead and color code some of these wires. So these wires that are on there right now are not necessarily the final wires, but this does give you an idea of how this looks. Now there's one other LED here in the saucer, and that is the impulse engine that fits at the back here, pointing towards the rear of the ship. So you can see this one actually goes right about here, with the LED pointing to the back of the impulse engine. Now I'm not exactly sure how the impulse engine works out, so let's go ahead and dry fit the parts and figure all that out. So I went ahead and I cut out some of the side parts here for the saucer, and this is the ones towards the back. I also went ahead and cut out the impulse engine in clear, and that we can get an idea of how this all goes together. So it plugs into a little locating tab right into the middle there on the back of the saucer, and let's see how this one works right here with the red. It's a smaller LED for sure, but it would go right about here, and it would point towards the back of the saucer, and I'm hoping that it would direct right into the middle of that and illuminate the entire thing. But from looking at this, it looks like we are going to have to do a little bit of surgery on the sides here, because those are totally blocked. And if we want the light to kind of shine through that, we're going to have to go ahead and mess around a bit with maybe like a lighting box or something to go ahead and direct that light to only the impulse engine. Plus, I don't want to have any light bleed or anything like that might come back to haunt me a little bit later. So this is going to be interesting to do. Once the top of the saucer is on though, it should actually be a pretty awesome looking light. I love that red too. So we're going to have to figure that out for sure. Probably have to cut out some areas and redo these support systems back here, but I think I can do it. As long as the light's directed towards that impulse engine and the impulse engine is masked off and opened up so that we get a full lighting on the entire thing, I think will be pretty decent. So we're going to go ahead and just call it quits for today, guys. I've kept you guys long enough. We have our LEDs in the process. We have all of the resistors soldered on to the positive leads for each of our LEDs. We've got some wire tacked on just to test it up. We went ahead and we hooked up our switch and our battery pack, flipped it on, everything works. So I think for today, that's a win for sure. Next episode, we're going to come on back. We have to still figure out all of the placement for our fiber optics, which I'm going to have to go ahead and tackle next week, because I can't seal up this without knowing where those fiber optics are going to go. So until next episode, everybody, thank you so much for joining me here. I'm hoping that you guys are kind of following along in my thought process. This is going to be a big experiment for me, and I'm hoping that you guys can get something out of it and join me in all the fun. So until next episode, everybody, go out there, get yourself some bench time, have some fun, join up with the Apollo group build and build some sci-fi. We'll see you back here next week on episode number 3, the USS Kelvin, for the Apollo group build here on Sci-Fi Wednesdays. All right, everybody, take care. We'll see you soon.